Hi guys, tonight we're stepping into the quiet, rain-soaked streets of 1940s Paris, where fashion dreams were born from desperation and a single tarot card reading changed everything. Drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe light a candle for that gentle glow, and let's walk together into the timeless rhythm of how Christian Dior came to dress the world. You're standing in occupied Paris, 1940. The air tastes like cigarette smoke mixed with fear and the metallic tang of ration tickets. Your name is Christian Dior, you're 35 years old, and your life has just collapsed like a souffle in a thunderstorm. Congratulations, you've just discovered that sometimes the best fashion empires are built on the ruins of everything you thought you wanted. Your family's fertilizer business? Gone. Wiped out faster than your Instagram story after you post something embarrassing. The gallery you opened with your friend? Closed tighter than your wallet after a shopping spree at Whole Foods. You're unemployed, living off friends' charity, and your biggest daily decision is whether to stretch yesterday's bread into today's breakfast, or save it for tomorrow's potential starvation. Your hands shake as you sketch dress designs on whatever paper you can find. Newspaper margins, the backs of bills you can't pay, scraps that smell like the desperation you're trying to ignore. These aren't just drawings. They're prayers rendered in graphite and hope. You sketch flowing skirts that use enough fabric to bankrupt a small nation. Because in your mind, abundance is rebellion against the grey wool uniforms that march past your window every morning. Listen to the scratch of pencil on paper, the distant sound of German boots on cobblestone. The Nazis have turned Paris into a city where beauty is rationed harder than butter. Fashion magazines now feature designs that use 3 yards of fabric maximum. Anything more is unpatriotic, wasteful, practically treasonous. You stare at your sketches of full skirts and nipped waists, and they feel like love letters to a world that might never exist again. But here's the thing about desperation. It makes you do stupid things, brave things, things that would make a financial advisor weep into their portfolio. You decide to visit a fortune teller. Yes, an actual fortune teller, complete with crystal ball and the kind of mystical authority that makes you forget you're spending your last coins on cosmic career counselling. The fortune teller's parlour smells like incense trying to mask the scent of boiled cabbage and broken dreams. She spreads the tarot cards with fingers that move like she's conducting an invisible orchestra. The cards whisper against the felt table, a sound softer than silk, more final than scissors through satin. She flips the first card. "You will make women happy," she says, her voice carrying the authority of someone who's seen enough futures to know which ones are worth betting on. The card shows a figure in flowing robes, arms outstretched like they're embracing the entire world, or maybe like they're measuring it for a custom dress. You lean forward, your coffee cup forgotten, growing cold like your bank account. Through flowers, you ask, because before the war, you designed stage sets and dreamed of becoming a botanical illustrator. Flowers were your first love, your safe space, your happy place before the world decided happiness was a luxury item. She shakes her head slowly, deliberately, like she's savouring a secret. Through dresses. The word hangs in the air between you like expensive perfume. Impossible to ignore, impossible to afford. You've been sketching dresses as a hobby, a creative outlet, something to do with your hands, while your mind processes the slow-motion apocalypse happening outside. But dresses as a career. In occupied Paris, where fabric is scarce and frivolity is forbidden, it's like being told you'll revolutionise transportation by breeding unicorns. Beautiful idea. Completely insane execution. But something about her certainty makes your spine straighten, makes your fingers itch for fabric instead of fertilizer spreadsheets. You've spent years helping plants grow in French soil. Maybe it's time to help dreams grow in French silk. The fortune teller places the second card, a figure surrounded by luxurious fabrics, gold coins scattered like confetti after the world's most expensive wedding. Abundance, excess, everything your current life isn't. "When?" you whisper, because hope is a dangerous drug and you're already feeling the first hit. She smiles like she knows something you don't, which to be fair, she absolutely does. "After the world heals." You walk home from the fortune teller through streets that smell like wet concrete and crushed ambitions. The prophecy bounces around your skull like a pinball, hitting every anxiety receptor you've carefully cultivated over the past year. Dresses. Through dresses, you'll make women happy. Right now, the only woman you're making happy is your landlady, and that's only because you haven't been evicted yet. Your apartment is smaller than a walk-in closet. Ironic, considering you're apparently destined for fashion greatness. The ceiling leaks when it rains, which is often, and the walls are thin enough that you can hear your neighbour's entire relationship drama playing out like the world's most depressing soap opera. You spread your sketches across the kitchen table that doubles as your desk, drafting board and dining room. Each drawing shows dresses that would require enough fabric to reupholster a small chateau, impossibly full skirts that would need their own zip code, fitted bodices that would require engineering degrees to construct properly. These aren't just clothes, they're architectural statements written in silk and spite. Your friend Bernard stops by with coffee that tastes like disappointment and chicory. He examines your sketches with the expression of someone trying to be supportive, while internally calculating the cost of your delusions. Christian, he says carefully, like he's diffusing a bomb made of silk and stubbornness. You know fabric is rationed, right? These designs would use more material than most people see in a year. You know this. Of course you know this. Your sketches are basically fantasy fiction rendered in graphite. But here's the thing about being unemployed, broke, and recently prophesied. Logic becomes optional. Hope becomes currency. And stubbornness? Stubbornness becomes your business plan. After the war, you say, repeating the fortune teller's words like a mantra. When the world heals. Bernard nods the way people nod when their friend announces they're quitting their day job to become a professional unicorn trainer, supportive but concerned about your mental health and their proximity to your inevitable breakdown. Listen to the distant rumble of trucks carrying supplies you can't have, dreams you can't afford. The truth is, your design experience consists of creating stage sets and arranging flowers. Your business experience amounts to watching your family's fertilizer company crumble like stale bread in the rain. Your fashion credentials include absolutely nothing except an unhealthy obsession with the way fabric moves and a growing collection of sketches that would make a wartime fabric inspector weep into their ration book. But every night, after your neighbour finishes arguing with her husband about money they don't have, you sit at the wobbly table and draw dresses that would make Cinderella's ball gown look understated, coats that would require their own transportation, suits that would turn walking into performance art. You sketch women who look nothing like the tired grey faces you see on the streets. Your women have waists like hourglasses, skirts that move like water, shoulders that could carry the weight of the world and still look elegant doing it. They wear your designs like armour made of dreams, protection rendered in pleats and possibilities. The war rages on outside your window, but inside your sketches there's beauty, abundance, joy. Things that feel illegal to imagine but impossible to stop creating. Your paper is running out. Your pencils are wearing down to stubs. Your coffee tastes like regret mixed with ground acorns. But you keep drawing, because the fortune teller said dresses, and something deep in your chest, the part that survived your family business collapsing and your gallery closing, believes her. You're designing for a world that doesn't exist yet, creating clothes for women who are currently rationing soap and stretching meals and pretending they're not terrified. But maybe, just maybe, when this nightmare ends, they'll want to remember what it feels like to be beautiful, to be excessive, to wear something that makes them feel like themselves, again instead of survivors. Your sketches are love letters to a future you can't guarantee, IOUs written in silk to women you haven't met yet, and somehow, in the middle of the worst war in human history, this feels like the most logical thing you've ever done. You're standing in the ruins of what used to be your art gallery, and it feels like visiting your own funeral. The space echoes with the ghost of conversations about modern art and champagne receptions that now seem as ancient as cave paintings. Dust motes dance in the afternoon light, and they're probably more valuable than anything left in your bank account. The gallery was your baby, your pride, your look me I made it moment that lasted approximately 18 months before the war decided your dreams were an unnecessary luxury. You and your partner Jacques had filled these walls with paintings that challenged minds and conversations that lasted until dawn. Now the walls are bare except for the rectangular shadows where art used to hang, like tan lines from a vacation you can't afford to remember. You walk through the empty rooms, your footsteps echoing like a slow funeral march for your former ambitions. The floor still bears scuff marks from the pedestals that held sculptures you couldn't afford to keep. There's a wine stain near the window from the opening night of an exhibition that seemed so important 6 months ago and now feels like someone else's memory. Listen to the hollow sound of your footsteps, the whisper of wind through cracked windows. But here's the weird thing about failure. It's surprisingly educational. Running a gallery taught you things that fertilizer sales never could. You learned to spot talent hiding behind technique. You developed an eye for beauty that transcends conventional wisdom. You discovered how to take something raw and unformed and present it in a way that makes people stop, stare, and reach for their wallets. These skills feel useless now, like knowing how to navigate by stars when you're trapped in a submarine. But as you stand in your dead gallery, sketching dress designs on the back of unpaid electricity bills, something clicks into place like fabric settling into its natural drape. Art and fashion aren't different languages. They're dialects of the same conversation about beauty, identity, and the human need to transform the ordinary into something extraordinary. You've been training for fashion design without knowing it, like accidentally preparing for a marathon by running away from your problems. Your gallery may be dead, but your eye, that indefinable ability to see potential where others see problems, is very much alive. And right now, it's telling you that women are going to emerge from this war hungry for beauty in ways they can't even articulate yet. You imagine the women who will wear your designs, not the stick-thin models from fashion magazines, but real women. Women who've spent years making do, making sacrifices, making best of situations that would break lesser spirits. They'll want dresses that make them feel like themselves again, not just survivors. Clothes that whisper, "You made it," instead of "You got through it." A dress isn't just fabric and thread any more than a painting is just canvas and pigment. It's transformation rendered wearable. It's confidence you can put on in the morning and carry with you through whatever the day brings. It's armor disguised as art, protection that looks like indulgence. Your sketches are becoming more refined, more detailed. The waists are getting smaller, the skirts fuller, the silhouettes more defined. You're designing for curves that have been hidden under practical clothing and spirits that have been buried under practical concerns. These aren't just dresses, they're resurrection garments for femininity that's been in hibernation. Jacques finds you there, surrounded by sketches and the ghosts of artistic dreams. He looks at your drawings with the same expression he used to reserve for particularly promising paintings, curious, calculating, slightly suspicious of his own enthusiasm. "These are beautiful," he says, and coming from someone who spent 2 years selling modern art to skeptical Parisians, that's not a compliment he offers lightly. But Christian, you do realise making dresses requires actual dresses, not just drawings of dresses. You nod because you're not stupid, just optimistic, which, given current circumstances, might be the same thing. But the fortune teller said, "After the world heals, and every sketch you complete feels like a down payment on that future. Your gallery is dead, but your vision is just getting started, and sometimes the best art comes from the ashes of everything you thought you wanted." You're sitting in your freezing apartment, and the irony tastes bitter as week-old coffee. Here you are, designing dresses that would require enough fabric to carpet a small palace, while outside your window, Parisian women are cutting up their curtains to make underwear. Congratulations, you've chosen the worst possible time in human history to become obsessed with fashion excess. The fabric rationing system works like this. Each person gets fabric tickets, small pieces of paper that hold more power than most government officials. A dress requires 16 tickets. A coat needs 18. Most people get enough tickets per year to make exactly one outfit, assuming they don't need to repair anything that falls apart, which everything does because wartime quality control is basically good enough to not immediately disintegrate. You spread your latest sketches across the table that wobbles like it's questioning your life choices. Each design shows waistlines that would require engineering degrees to achieve, and skirts so full they'd need their own postal code. These aren't just clothes. They're architectural impossibilities rendered in graphite and stubborn optimism. Listen to the scratch of your pencil against paper, the distant sound of ration queues forming in the pre-dawn darkness. Your neighbour, Madame Rousseau, stops by with a Zatz coffee that tastes like disappointment mixed with ground acorns. She examines your sketches with the expression of someone trying to be polite about a friend's obviously delusional hobby. "Christian," she says carefully, like she's explaining basic mathematics to a particularly slow child. "You do realise there's a war on. These designs would use more fabric than most people see in their entire lives. You know this. Of course you know this. Your sketches are basically science fiction written in silk. But here's the thing about being broke, prophesied, and slightly unhinged by recent events. Practicality becomes optional. Logic takes a backseat to vision. And sanity, well, sanity was never really your strong suit anyway. The truth is, every night when you sketch, you're not designing for the world that exists. You're designing for the world that will exist after this nightmare ends. Because somewhere deep in your chest, the part that survived your family business collapsing and your gallery dying, you believe the fortune teller. After the war, women will want to feel beautiful again. They'll want to remember what it's like to wear something that makes them feel powerful instead of practical. You imagine women emerging from bomb shelters and ration lines, tired of making do, tired of utility clothes that prioritise function over form. They'll want dresses that whisper, "You survived, and now you deserve to be magnificent." They'll want fashion that argues with gravity, that refuses to be reasonable, that makes ordinary Tuesday afternoons feel like occasions worth celebrating. But designing impossible dresses with imaginary fabric while living on borrowed money and stubborn hope feels like planning a vacation to Mars. Beautiful idea, completely insane execution. Your sketches are IOUs written to a future that might never come, promises made to women who are currently too busy surviving to think about being beautiful. The heating in your apartment stopped working 3 days ago, so you wrap yourself in every piece of clothing you own and keep drawing. Your fingers are so cold they feel like icicles attached to questionable life choices, but you keep sketching because stopping feels like giving up on the future entirely. Each dress you design is a small act of rebellion against the grey wool uniformity that marches past your window every morning. They're love letters to femininity that's been rationed alongside sugar and soap. They're architectural arguments for beauty in a world that's forgotten what beauty looks like when it's not being bombed. Your pencil wears down to a stub, so you sharpen it with a kitchen knife that's duller than your prospects. But you keep drawing, because the fortune teller said dresses, and something about her certainty makes your fingers itch for silk instead of surrender. You discover Paris has a secret fashion underground, and it operates like a speakeasy for style-starved souls. It's not exactly the resistance, but it's definitely resistance adjacent. While most of the city focuses on not starving or getting arrested, a small group of designers, seamstresses and fashion-obsessed rebels meet in basement workshops to keep the dream of French elegance alive. The meetings happen in places that smell like determination mixed with desperation. Tonight, it's the back room of a millinery shop that officially makes practical headwear for wartime efficiency, but secretly crafts tiny works of art disguised as hats. The space is smaller than a modern closet, lit by candles that flicker like they're nervous about being discovered. You bring your sketches wrapped in yesterday's newspaper, and they feel heavier than state secrets. Around the table sit people who understand that fashion isn't frivolity, it's hope rendered wearable. There's Marie, who can make silk from potato sacks and miracles from thread scraps. Jean-Claude, who treats hat making like it's a form of prayer. And Simone, who embroiders details so fine they make angels weep with envy. Listen to the whispered conversations about hidden fabric stashes, the soft rustle of sketches being passed hand to hand. The group operates like a fashion black market. Someone knows a farmer who has sheep. Someone else has access to a dyeing facility that officially makes military uniforms, but might, hypothetically, create other colours after hours. Another person has connections to a weaving operation that could, theoretically, produce small quantities of luxury fabrics for research purposes. It's like planning a heist, except instead of stealing money, you're stealing beauty back from a world that's forgotten it exists. You show them your sketches, and the room goes silent. Not the bad kind of silent, the good kind, where people are processing something that breaks their brains in wonderful ways. Your full skirts and nipped waists look impossibly extravagant in a world of utility clothing, like champagne recipes shared during Prohibition. "These are beautiful," Marie whispers, tracing the line of a coat that would use enough wool to outfit 3 soldiers. But how would anyone ever make them? That's when you realise you're not just designing clothes, you're designing a revolution. Every sketch is a manifesto written in silk, a declaration that French fashion will not be rationed, regulated, or reduced to German-approved practicality. These designs are acts of cultural warfare disguised as pretty dresses. The group starts problem-solving like they're planning D-Day, except instead of liberating France, they're liberating femininity. Marie calculates fabric requirements. Jean-Claude sketches hat designs that would complement your silhouettes. Simone plans embroidery details that would take months to complete, but would make every dress a work of art. You realise this isn't just about surviving the war anymore. This is about ensuring that when the war ends, French fashion explodes back onto the world stage with such force that everyone remembers why Paris was the capital of style in the first place. Your impossible dresses aren't just sketches, they're battle plans for a fashion revolution that will happen the moment freedom returns. The meeting ends with everyone taking copies of your sketches, promising to think about techniques, to experiment with materials, to keep the dream alive until reality catches up. You walk home through streets that smell like defeat and rationed soap, but your sketches feel lighter, like they're finally shared secrets instead of solitary obsessions. By the time you reach your apartment, you're already planning your next design. Something even more impossible, even more beautiful, even more perfectly suited to a world that doesn't exist yet but absolutely will. Your underground fashion network starts functioning like a support group for beauty addicts going through enforced sobriety. Every week you meet to share discoveries that would make normal people question your priorities, but make perfect sense to people who understand that style is a form of resistance. Marie arrives tonight with fabric samples that she's created, using techniques that would impress medieval alchemists. She's learned to make silk-like material from wood pulp, create wool alternatives from nettle fibres, and produce dyes from vegetables that create colours so subtle they look like expensive secrets. Her workshop smells like botanical experiments and stubborn optimism. Listen to the soft sound of fabric samples being passed between hands, the whispered excitement of people discovering new possibilities. You've been refining your sketches based on reality constraints that feel like solving math problems while blindfolded. How do you create the illusion of a full skirt using a quarter of the normal fabric? How do you achieve a fitted bodice when elastic is reserved for military equipment? How do you make something look expensive when expensive doesn't exist anymore? The answer, you discover, lies in the details that don't require extra materials. The cut of a sleeve can suggest luxury without using luxury fabrics. The way a collar sits can imply structure without requiring structured undergarments. The placement of a seam can create silhouettes that look complex but are actually simple engineering disguised as artistry. You start sketching dresses that are optical illusions rendered in cloth. Designs that look like they require impossible amounts of fabric, but actually use clever construction to create volume through technique rather than material excess. These aren't just clothes, they're magic tricks that happen to be wearable. Simone shows you embroidery techniques that create texture without bulk, patterns that catch light in ways that make simple fabrics look precious. She can make a plain wool dress look like it's covered in diamonds using only white thread and strategic placement. Her needlework is basically wizardry disguised as domestic skill. Jean-Claude contributes accessories that elevate everything, hats that cost almost nothing to make but completely transform an outfit's silhouette. Belts crafted from materials that officially don't exist, but somehow do if you know the right people. His creations are proof that the right accessories can make a flour sack look like haute couture. The group starts creating actual prototypes, turning your sketches into real clothes that real women could actually wear. Sort of. The fabrics are unconventional, the construction methods are experimental, and the fit is more theoretical than perfect. But they're real clothes that embody your vision of post-war femininity. You watch Marie fit a dress on a dress form borrowed from a closed department store, and something clicks into place like fabric settling into its natural drape. This is what you're meant to do. Not run art galleries or sell fertilizer, but transform women through clothes that make them feel like better versions of themselves. Each prototype is a small victory against the forces that want to reduce everything to practical, utilitarian, survival-focused basics. Every dress that emerges from your underground workshop is proof that beauty persists, that style survives, that French fashion refuses to be defeated by anything as mundane as a world war. Your apartment is filling up with prototype dresses and experimental fabrics, turning your living space into a shrine to impossible fashion. Your neighbours probably think you've lost your mind, and they're probably right. But madness in service of beauty feels like the most reasonable response to an unreasonable world. You walk into the House of Lelong on a Tuesday morning that tastes like opportunity mixed with terror. The air smells like expensive perfume, quality fabrics, and the kind of money that doesn't need to announce itself loudly. Your palms are sweating despite the October chill, and your one good suit, borrowed from Bernard and altered with optimism, feels like costume armour for a battle you're not sure you're qualified to fight. Lucien Lelong himself is exactly what you'd expect from a man who dresses the wives of politicians and the mistresses of millionaires, impeccably tailored, impossibly elegant, and possessed of the kind of authority that makes you want to confess sins you haven't committed yet. He examines your sketches like a doctor reviewing x-rays of a patient with interesting but potentially fatal symptoms. Your proportions are correct, he says, which from Lelong is practically a standing ovation. Your technical understanding is developing. Your sense of drama is perhaps too developed. He pauses, studying a sketch of a ball gown that would require its own infrastructure. But talent that can be refined is more valuable than technique that lacks vision. Congratulations, you've just been hired as the fashion equivalent of a promising but unproven rookie athlete. Your salary's barely enough to cover rent and bread, but you're getting paid to learn from one of the few designers in Paris who remembers what luxury looked like before the world forgot how to be beautiful. Listen to the whisper of silk being draped, the precise snip of scissors cutting through expensive mistakes. The Atelier operates like a cathedral, dedicated to the worship of perfect seams. Every surface is covered with fabrics that cost more per yard than most people earn in a month. Seamstresses move with the focused intensity of surgeons, their hands creating miracles from materials that shouldn't cooperate, but somehow do when touched by people who understand the physics of fabric. Your first assignment is to observe. Just watch. Don't touch anything. Don't offer suggestions. And definitely don't try to help until you understand that fashion at this level isn't about clothes. It's about transformation rendered in silk and status. You watch fittings where women arrive looking ordinary and leave looking like they could overthrow governments through the sheer force of their elegance. The clients are fascinating studies in the relationship between money and insecurity. Wives of industrialists who've never worked a day but are terrified of being replaced by younger models. Aging actresses who treat each dress like armour against irrelevance. Society women who measure their worth in the number of heads that turn when they enter a room. You learn that haute couture isn't just about making clothes, it's about selling dreams to people who can afford to have their fantasies tailored to fit. Every dress is a collaborative fiction between designer and client, a story they tell themselves about who they could be if the right fabric and perfect fit could transform personality along with silhouette. Madame Arnaud, Lelong's head seamstress, becomes your unofficial professor in the University of Luxury Construction. She's been creating miracles from fabric since before you were born, and her hands move like they're conducting symphonies in silk. She teaches you that the difference between expensive clothes and cheap clothes isn't just the price tag. It's the 10,000 tiny decisions that no one notices but everyone feels. A seam, she tells you while demonstrating a French seam that requires twice the work for half the visibility, should be beautiful even when no one will ever see it. The woman wearing this dress will feel the difference, even if she can't explain why. This is your introduction to the religion of quality, where perfection in the invisible details creates confidence in the visible results. You're learning that fashion at this level isn't about following trends. It's about creating desires that people didn't know they had, until they see them made manifest in silk and careful stitching. Every day feels like drinking from a fire hose made of liquid elegance. Your notebook fills with observations, techniques, and revelations that would have sounded like foreign languages 6 months ago. You're not just learning to make clothes, you're learning to make dreams wearable. 3 months into your apprenticeship at Lelong, you realize that haute couture operates on economic principles that would make business school professors weep into their textbooks. You're learning that the fashion industry is basically legalized alchemy, taking $50 worth of materials and transforming them into $2,000 dreams through the application of skill, exclusivity, and carefully cultivated mystique. The math makes no sense until you understand that you're not selling fabric. You're selling transformation, status, and the kind of confidence that can only be tailored to fit. A dress that costs more than most people's annual salary isn't expensive because of the materials. It's expensive because wearing it makes a woman feel like she could conquer nations through the strategic deployment of perfect tailoring. Listen to the soft rustle of tissue paper protecting precious garments, the whispered conversations about which clients can afford which dreams. You watch Lelong navigate client consultations like a diplomatic negotiation between egos, budgets, and the laws of physics. Madame Beaumont wants a dress for her daughter's wedding that makes her look 20 years younger and 40 pounds lighter, while somehow also communicating her impeccable taste and financial status. Oh, and she needs it in 3 weeks, during fabric rationing for half the usual price. Of course, Madame, Lelong says with the smooth confidence of someone who has been performing miracles to order for decades. We'll create something that captures your vision perfectly. What he doesn't mention is that capturing her vision perfectly will require the design team to work 18-hour days, the seamstresses to use techniques that border on supernatural, and the entire operation to function like a precision instrument calibrated for producing impossibilities on deadline. You learn that the real skill in haute couture isn't just creating beautiful clothes, it's managing the delicate psychology of clients who are paying extraordinary amounts of money for items that exist primarily to make them feel extraordinary. Every fitting is part therapy session, part performance art, part diplomatic summit between what the client wants, what the client can afford, and what the laws of physics will allow. The wartime economy has turned luxury fashion into an even stranger beast. Materials that used to be standard are now impossible to find. Techniques that used to be routine now require creative problem solving that would impress military strategists. Clients who used to order new wardrobes every season now invest in single pieces that need to work for multiple occasions and convey maximum impact with minimum excess. You watch Madame Arnault transform a bolt of fabric that officially doesn't exist into a coat that will make the wife of a government minister look like she was born to give orders to history itself. The construction requires techniques that she improvises on the spot, using stitching methods that she's developing in real time to compensate for the unusual properties of fabric that was never intended for couture applications. This is your education in the economics of impossible, how to create luxury during shortage, maintain exclusivity during rationing, and preserve the dream of French elegance when the world is focused on more practical concerns like not getting bombed. Every dress that leaves the atelier is proof that some things are too important to be practical. You start understanding that fashion at this level operates on the same principles as fine art or rare wines. The value isn't just in the object itself, but in the story it tells, the status it confers, and the transformation it enables. A Lelong dress isn't just clothing, it's a membership card to a very exclusive club of women who understand that style is a form of soft power that can be more influential than money or politics. Your notebook fills with observations about the relationship between price, perception, and the peculiar alchemy that transforms fabric into fantasy. You're not just learning to make clothes, you're learning to manufacture desires that people are willing to pay extraordinary amounts of money to fulfill. 6 months at Lelong has taught you that haute couture speaks in a language so subtle that most people don't realize they're fluent in it. You're learning to read the grammar of sleeves, the syntax of silhouettes, and the complex vocabulary of details that communicate more about a woman's status, taste, and aspirations than her actual words ever could. Today's lesson comes courtesy of the Duchess of Something Important Sounding, who arrives for her fitting with the kind of presence that makes furniture rearrange itself in her honour. She's wearing a Lelong creation from last season, and you watch how every element of her outfit works together to tell a story about power, refinement, and the casual confidence of someone who's never had to check a price tag. The way her sleeve hits exactly at her wrist says, "I have people who ensure my clothes fit perfectly." The subtle detail at her neckline whispers, "I can afford embellishments that most people wouldn't notice but everyone feels." The cut of her skirt announces, "I understand that true luxury is in the proportions, not the ostentation." Listen to the whispered conference between the seamstresses, discussing adjustments measured in millimeters that will make the difference between good and transformative. Madame Arnault pulls you aside during the fitting to teach you the secret language of alterations. See how we adjust the shoulder line by exactly 3 millimeters. The Duchess won't notice consciously, but she'll feel more confident. Her posture will improve, she'll walk differently. This is why our clients return. not because they understand what we do, but because they feel the results. You realise you're learning a form of practical psychology disguised as fashion construction. Every tuck, dart and seam placement is calculated not just for aesthetic effect, but for emotional impact. A properly fitted bodice doesn't just look elegant, it makes the wearer feel like she can handle whatever the day brings. A well-cut sleeve doesn't just move beautifully, it makes gestures feel more graceful, more authoritative. The war has added new layers to this secret language. Clients want clothes that look luxurious while using minimal materials, elegant while being practical, fashionable while avoiding the appearance of excess that might attract unwanted attention from authorities or neighbours who are struggling with rationing. It's like writing poetry while following strict rules about syllable count and rhyme scheme. You watch Lelong work with a client who needs a dress for a diplomatic function, something that looks appropriately French without appearing unpatriotic, expensive enough to maintain her husband's status without seeming wasteful during wartime, fashionable enough to represent French style without being so avant-garde that it draws criticism. The design consultation becomes a masterclass in diplomatic dressing. Fashion, Long explains while sketching subtle modifications to accommodate all these competing requirements, is about communication. Every choice we make sends a message. Our job is to ensure that message says exactly what our client wants it to say, whether she realises it or not. You start seeing clothes differently, not as objects, but as communication tools. A hemline isn't just a hemline, it's a statement about modernity versus tradition. A colour choice isn't just aesthetic, it's a position on optimism versus practicality. A silhouette isn't just flattering, it's an argument about femininity, authority, and the wearer's relationship to current social expectations. Your sketches begin incorporating these psychological elements alongside the aesthetic ones. You design dresses that don't just look beautiful, they make the wearer feel capable, confident, memorable. You learn to think about how fabric choices affect mood, how construction techniques influence posture, how details impact the way others perceive and respond to the wearer. This is your advanced education in the secret language that haute couture speaks, a language of confidence rendered in silk, authority tailored to fit, and transformation that happens one perfect seam at a time. You're not just learning to make clothes, you're learning to craft the external elements that help women become the people they want to be. You're standing in a basement that officially doesn't exist, watching French fashion hide from the Nazis like a resistance movement armed with needles instead of bullets. The year is 1943, and above your head, German officers patrol streets where haute couture is now classified somewhere between suspicious activity and outright treason. Down here, surrounded by hidden bolts of silk and illegal sewing machines, you're participating in the most elegant form of rebellion ever conceived. The space smells like fabric softener mixed with defiance. What used to be a wine cellar has been transformed into a secret atelier where a handful of Paris's most talented seamstresses gather to keep French fashion alive through techniques that would make actual spies jealous. Every thread is accounted for, every scrap of fabric is precious, and every dress produced here is an act of cultural warfare disguised as really excellent tailoring. Listen to the muffled sound of sewing machines operating at whisper volume, the careful footsteps of people who understand that discovery could mean deportation. Your role has evolved from apprentice to co-conspirator in this underground fashion network. Lelong's official operations have been severely restricted. German authorities now approve all designs, limit fabric usage, and require that French fashion conform to their standards of appropriate wartime simplicity. Translation: they want French women to dress like efficient worker bees instead of elegant butterflies, effectively neutralising one of France's most powerful cultural weapons. But here in the basement, you're designing clothes that would make Heinrich Himmler choke on his schnitzel. Full skirts that use enough fabric to be classified as war crimes. Fitted bodices that argue with German notions of practical efficiency. Embellishments that exist purely for beauty, serving no utilitarian purpose except to remind people that some things are too precious to be practical. Marie has become the quartermaster of this fabric underground, maintaining supply chains that operate like smuggling networks. A farm wife trades cheese for silk thread. A resistance fighter liberates fabric from a German supply depot. A sympathetic dye house worker produces colours that officially don't exist, creating materials in shades of hope and rebellion. The women who commission these illegal dresses risk everything for the opportunity to wear something beautiful. They could be arrested for possession of excessive clothing, questioned about where they obtained unauthorized fabrics, or worse, suspected of connections to black market operations that extend far beyond fashion into actual resistance activities. But they commission the dresses anyway, because they understand something the occupying forces don't, that taking away a French woman's right to be elegant is like trying to stop the Seine from flowing. It might work temporarily, but the river will find another way, and eventually it will reclaim its natural course with interest. You sketch by candlelight, designing clothes for a world that exists only in your imagination. A post-war Paris where women emerge from years of enforced simplicity, hungry for beauty, desperate for femininity, ready to celebrate their survival through the most glorious display of French fashion the world has ever seen. Each sketch is a promise to the future, an IOU written in silk and stubbornness. These designs aren't just clothes, they're architectural plans for the reconstruction of French elegance, blueprints for a fashion revolution that will happen the moment the occupation ends. The basement feels like a time capsule where the real spirit of French fashion is being preserved, protected, and prepared for the day when it can once again emerge into the light. Every dress created here is proof that style survives, that elegance endures, and that sometimes the most powerful resistance is simply refusing to let beauty die. The war has taught you that clothes aren't just about fashion, they're about psychological armor for navigating a world that's trying to break your spirit through rationing, regulations, and the daily reminder that you're living under someone else's rules. You watch women transform their relationship with clothing from aesthetic choice to survival strategy, and it's both heartbreaking and inspiring. Madame Fournier arrives at the underground atelier wearing a coat that's been altered so many times, it tells the story of the entire occupation in seams and patches. Originally a luxury piece from 1938, it's now been shortened, lengthened, taken in, let out, and modified to work with whatever undergarments she can acquire. It's like an archaeological record of adaptation, each alteration marking another month of making do. "I need to look successful," she explains while examining your latest sketches. "My husband's business partners can't know how badly we're struggling. Appearance is the only currency we have left that the Germans can't devalue." This is your education in the economics of appearance during wartime. Women who used to change outfits 3 times a day now own exactly 2 presentable dresses, one for wearing, one for washing. They've learned to create variety through accessories that can be mixed, matched, and reconfigured to suggest a wardrobe that doesn't actually exist. Listen to the soft sound of hands smoothing fabric that's been worn too many times, the whispered conversations about which neighbours might trade clothing coupons. You design what you secretly call transformer dresses, garments that can be styled multiple ways to create the illusion of variety. A collar that can be worn up or down, reversed for a different colour, or removed entirely. Sleeves that detach for summer wear or layer for winter warmth. Belts that change the entire silhouette of a dress, turning day wear into evening elegance through the strategic deployment of fabric and buckle placement. The women who commission these pieces understand that they're not just buying clothes, they're investing in psychological resilience. A dress that makes you feel confident can help you navigate checkpoints with authority instead of anxiety. A coat that suggests prosperity can open doors that would remain closed to someone who looks defeated. An outfit that makes you feel like yourself can preserve your identity when everything else is being stripped away. You learn to read the subtle signs of wartime stress in how women carry themselves. Shoulders that curve inward from years of trying to be invisible. Hands that automatically check pockets for identification papers before reaching for anything. Eyes that scan rooms for exits before noticing the decor. Your job becomes designing clothes that help them remember how to stand straight, move gracefully, and occupy space like they have the right to exist beautifully. The fitting sessions become impromptu therapy sessions where women talk about losses that go far beyond fashion, friends who've disappeared in the night, businesses that have been confiscated, children who've been sent away for safety and might not return. But as you pin and adjust and perfect the fit, you watch them transform from people who are simply surviving into people who remember what it feels like to thrive. "When I wear this dress," Madame Dubois tells you during a fitting for a coat that's been designed to look expensive while using minimal materials, "I remember who I was before all this. It's like putting on a costume of my former self, and for a few hours I can pretend that person still exists. This is what fashion becomes during occupation, not frivolity, but resistance. Not vanity, but preservation of identity. Not excess, but the essential human need to feel beautiful, dignified, and worthy of respect, even when the world insists you're not. Every dress you create is a small victory against forces that want to reduce people to numbers, categories, and functional units, instead of individuals deserving of beauty, elegance, and joy. You're sketching by candlelight again, but tonight feels different. The designs flowing from your pencil aren't just clothes. They're celebration costumes for a party that hasn't been scheduled yet, but absolutely will happen. Liberation is coming. You can feel it in the changing rhythm of the city, taste it in the way people are starting to walk with straighter spines, hear it in the whispered conversations that are growing bolder each day. Your notebook has become a catalogue of resurrection fashion. Dresses designed for women who will emerge from years of grey utility clothing, ready to bloom like flowers after a brutal winter. Coats that argue with the very concept of rationing. Skirts so full they'll require their own gravitational field. These aren't just clothes. They're architectural plans for the rebuilding of French femininity. The basement atelier has evolved into mission control for the fashion liberation of Paris. Marie has been stockpiling materials like she's preparing for the style apocalypse. Bolts of fabric hidden in false walls, spools of thread cached in locations that would make resistance fighters proud, buttons and embellishments buried like treasure, awaiting the right moment for resurrection. Listen to the excited whispers of women planning wardrobes for a freedom they can almost taste, the soft rustle of fabric samples being examined by candlelight. When the Americans arrive, Simone says while examining a sketch for a dress that would use enough fabric to carpet a small apartment, I want to be wearing something that reminds them why French fashion is worth liberating. She's been working on a hidden collection of pieces that exist purely to celebrate the moment when beauty is no longer regulated, rationed, or subject to German approval. You realise you're not just designing clothes for individual clients anymore. You're planning the costume design for the greatest show Paris has ever staged. The return of French elegance to a world that's forgotten what real style looks like. Every dress in your notebook is a weapon in the cultural war that will follow military liberation. The designs are getting more elaborate, more defiant, more impossibly beautiful with each passing day. Ball gowns for women who haven't attended a ball in 4 years, evening wear for parties that will last until dawn, day dresses that turn grocery shopping into performance art. You're designing for women who will want to celebrate not just surviving, but persisting as beautiful, elegant, undefeated human beings. Your liberation collection includes what you're secretly calling revenge dresses, garments so breathtakingly gorgeous that they'll make the occupying forces realize exactly what they tried to suppress. Every seam will be perfect, every detail exquisite, every silhouette a reminder that French fashion doesn't just survive oppression, it emerges stronger, more beautiful, more determined to dazzle the world. The women commissioning these pieces understand they're not just ordering clothes, they're making reservations for their post-war identities. They're deciding who they want to be when the world stops being insane, how they want to look when they can finally exhale, what message they want to send when they walk out of hiding and back into the light. I want to wear something, Madame Laurent tells you while describing her vision for a Liberation Day outfit, that makes it clear I was never truly defeated, that I bent but never broke, that they might have controlled my fabric rations but they never controlled my spirit. This is what fashion becomes when it's about to be liberated, not just personal expression, but cultural declaration, not just individual style, but collective statement, not just clothes, but the external manifestation of a people's refusal to be anything less than magnificent, even when the world has tried its hardest to make them forget what magnificence looks like. Your pencil moves across paper like it's conducting an orchestra of silk and defiance, designing the costumes for the greatest comeback story ever told. August 25th, 1944. Paris is free, and the city erupts in a celebration that makes Mardi Gras look like a quiet book club meeting. You're standing on the Champs-Élysées watching 4 years of suppressed style explode like a fashion supernova, and it's more beautiful than anything you could have sketched in your most optimistic moments. The women emerging from hiding are wearing your underground creations like victory banners. Madame Fournier appears in the transformer dress you designed, now configured for maximum celebration impact. Collar up, belt positioned, to create the most dramatic silhouette possible, every detail adjusted to announce that French elegance has not only survived but emerged victorious and ready to dazzle the world into submission. The Americans and British soldiers are staring like they've discovered a new species of gorgeous. These men have been fighting their way across a continent of rationing and wartime utility clothing, and suddenly they're surrounded by women who look like they stepped out of fairy tales. It's like watching soldiers discover that rumours of French style weren't just propaganda, they were understatements. Listen to the sound of heels clicking on liberated cobblestones, the rustle of silk that hasn't been heard in public for 4 years, the delighted gasps of people seeing true elegance after years of enforced simplicity. Your Liberation collection is performing exactly as designed. Every dress acts as a cultural statement that France is back. French women are magnificent, and anyone who thought they could regulate beauty into submission was adorably naive. The revenge dresses are working overtime, each one proving that you can suppress style temporarily, but when it returns, it comes back with interest and a serious attitude problem. Marie appears wearing a coat that technically shouldn't exist. The fabric was acquired through channels that would make international smugglers jealous. The construction required techniques that border on miraculous, and the final result makes her look like she could personally negotiate France's return to global fashion prominence. She's surrounded by American photographers who are frantically documenting proof that French style is indeed everything they've heard and more. The psychological transformation is immediate and dramatic. Women who spent years trying to be invisible are suddenly taking up space like they own it. Shoulders are back, chins are up, and everyone is walking like they're on runways instead of war-torn streets. It's like watching an entire city remember how to be itself after years of being forced to pretend it was something else. You realise you're witnessing the birth of post-war fashion consciousness. These women aren't just celebrating liberation from occupation, they're celebrating liberation from practical clothing, from rationed beauty, from the idea that style is frivolous when the world is serious. They're proving that elegance isn't a luxury, it's a necessity for the human spirit. The underground designs are performing their secondary function perfectly. They're serving as advertisements for what French fashion can achieve when it's not being regulated by people who think beauty should be rationed like sugar. Every dress is a business card for the industry that will rebuild itself on the foundation of pure, undiluted French elegance. Foreign fashion reporters are frantically taking notes, trying to document techniques that seem impossible given wartime limitations. They don't understand that limitation breeds innovation, that scarcity creates creativity, that French designers have spent 4 years learning to make miracles from practically nothing. Skills that will serve them well in the luxury market they're about to reconquer. Your notebook is filling with observations about post-liberation psychology and its relationship to clothing choices. Women aren't just wearing pretty dresses, they're wearing their identities back, their confidence restored, their refusal to be anything less than magnificent despite everything they've survived. This is fashion, as cultural revolution, style as statement of national character, elegance as proof that some things are too important to be practical. 6 months after liberation, you're watching American fashion journalists lose their minds in the most elegant way possible. They arrive in Paris expecting to find a fashion industry, limping back to life after 4 years of oppression, and instead they discover a creative explosion that makes pre-war Paris look restrained. Congratulations, you've accidentally helped create the most magnificent fashion comeback in human history. The journalists gather in what's left of the Lelong Atelier, notebooks ready to document the recovery of French fashion, and they're completely unprepared for what they encounter. These are people who've spent the war years dealing with American fashion pragmatism, sensible shoes, efficient silhouettes, clothing designed to function rather than transform. They're about to experience French fashion like cold water to the face of their assumptions about what clothes should do. You watch their expressions change as they examine the pieces created during the occupation. What they expected to find. Sad attempts at fashion hampered by material shortages and creative suppression. What they're actually seeing. Innovation born from necessity. Creativity unleashed by limitation. Techniques developed in secret that surpass anything pre-war designers imagined possible. Listen to the scratch of pencils frantically trying to capture details that seem impossible. the whispered conversations between journalists who are realizing they're witnessing something historically significant. "How did you achieve this silhouette with such limited fabric?" asks Margaret Thompson from Vogue, examining a dress that creates the illusion of using twice as much material as it actually contains. She's holding the garment like it's archaeological evidence of advanced civilization, trying to understand construction methods that seem to violate the laws of physics and economics simultaneously. You explain the techniques developed during rationing, how limitation forced innovation, how secrecy created exclusivity, how the need to hide fabric usage led to construction methods that are actually superior to traditional techniques. What sounds like making do was actually making revolutionary advances in couture construction, disguised as wartime adaptation. The Americans are documenting everything with the intensity of anthropologists discovering a new culture. They're learning that while American fashion focused on efficiency and functionality during the war, French fashion went underground and emerged with techniques that make efficiency look boring and functionality seem like a failure of imagination. Robert Patterson from Harper's Bazaar keeps asking questions that reveal how completely unprepared he was for this level of sophistication. "You created this entire collection during the occupation, with German oversight, while materials were rationed." He's trying to understand how French fashion not only survived oppression, but used it as creative fertilizer for innovations that surpass anything produced during peacetime abundance. The revelation that hits them hardest is that scarcity created excellence. While American fashion spent the war years making do with less, French fashion spent the same period learning to make more from less, developing skills, techniques, and creative approaches that will define luxury fashion for the next decade. You realize these journalists are witnessing the birth of what will become the most influential fashion movement of the century. They're documenting the moment when French fashion stopped competing with other nations and started competing with impossibility itself. Every sketch, every technique, every innovation they're recording will become the foundation for fashion's complete domination of global luxury markets. The interviews become cultural exchange programs where Americans learn that French fashion during occupation wasn't handicapped. It was concentrated, refined, and perfected under pressure that would have crushed lesser creative traditions. What they're documenting isn't recovery. It's the emergence of fashion as pure art form, freed from commercial constraints and focused entirely on the pursuit of beauty as a revolutionary act. Your notebook fills with their questions and your answers, creating an accidental manual for fashion innovation under impossible circumstances. You're not just explaining techniques, you're teaching the philosophy that will reshape how the world thinks about luxury, creativity, and the relationship between limitation and excellence. Spring 1946. You're sitting across from investors who speak in numbers that make your former fertilizer business look like a lemonade stand, and they're all asking the same question. How soon can you scale this magic? The war is over, rationing is ending, and suddenly everyone wants to invest in the French fashion revolution that you accidentally helped create while hiding in basements and sketching by candlelight. The meetings happen in offices that smell like expensive cigars and ambitious dreams. Men in perfectly tailored suits examine your portfolio like they're evaluating technology that could change the world, which, in a sense, they are. French fashion has evolved beyond clothing into a cultural export that could rebuild the national economy through the strategic deployment of beauty and exclusivity. Marcel Boussac, the textile magnate whose wealth makes small countries look financially modest, studies your sketches with the intensity of someone calculating the profit margins on dreams. These designs, he says, tracing the line of a coat that would require its own engineering degree to construct properly, represent the future of luxury goods. American money is about to flood Europe, and they're going to want to buy French elegance. Listen to the rustle of contracts worth more money than you've ever imagined. The whispered conversations about international expansion and global fashion dominance. You realize you're not just discussing fashion anymore, you're planning the reconstruction of France through the export of style. The Americans have money, the world is hungry for beauty after years of practicality, and French fashion has emerged from the war with techniques and innovations that no other country can match. It's like discovering you're sitting on oil deposits made of silk and sophistication. The business model is brilliantly simple. Create clothes so beautiful that wealthy people around the world will pay extraordinary amounts of money for the privilege of wearing French craftsmanship. Use that money to fund the rebuilding of the fashion industry. use the rebuilt industry to create even more beautiful clothes, repeat until France owns the global luxury market. But Boussac wants more than just individual success. He's proposing to bankroll an entire fashion house, with you as the creative director of what could become the most influential design operation in history. It's like being offered the chance to conduct a symphony orchestra, except instead of music, you'll be creating wearable art that transforms women into walking advertisements for French excellence. The terms are generous enough to make your head spin. Unlimited budget for materials, access to the finest seamstresses in Paris, workshops equipped with everything necessary to turn your sketches into reality, and most importantly, complete creative control over designs that will represent French fashion to the world. I want to create clothes, you tell him, that make women feel like they could conquer anything. Not just beautiful clothes, but transformational clothes, garments that change how women see themselves and how the world sees them. This isn't just about fashion, it's about psychology rendered in silk, confidence tailored to fit perfectly. Boussac nods like you've just described a business plan for printing money. American women have been wearing practical clothes for years. They're ready to remember what it feels like to be elegant, and when they do, they'll pay whatever it costs to feel that way consistently. You're being offered the opportunity to turn your underground sketches into a global fashion empire, to transform your basement rebellion into the foundation of French cultural dominance. To prove that the fortune teller was right, you will make women happy through dresses, and in the process you'll rebuild an industry, redefine luxury, and remind the world why Paris is the capital of everything beautiful. The contracts are ready, the money is available, the world is waiting. All that remains is your signature on agreements that will transform you from unemployed sketch artist into the architect of fashion's future. You're standing backstage in your first fashion show as a house director, and your hands are shaking like you're diffusing a bomb made of silk and revolutionary ideas. Outside, the fashion editors of the world sit in chairs, arranged to witness what they think will be another modest post-war collection. They have no idea they're about to see the fashion equivalent of an atomic explosion, delivered in 90 looks that will redefine what clothes can do to the human silhouette. The collection hangs around you like a prayer made manifest in fabric. Every dress represents years of secret sketching, underground innovation, and dreams deferred by war and rationing. The waists are smaller than human anatomy should allow. The skirts use enough fabric to carpet small buildings. The silhouettes create shapes that argue with gravity and win through the sheer force of perfect engineering disguised as effortless elegance. Your lead model, Sylvie, emerges from the dressing area wearing look number 1, the bar suit that will launch 1,000 fashion careers and bankrupt a few textile companies. The jacket nips her waist to dimensions that seem geometrically impossible, while the skirt explodes outward in pleats that use more fabric than most people saw during the entire war. She looks like an illustration of femininity drawn by someone who believes subtlety is for people who lack imagination. Listen to the whispered final instructions to models who are about to change fashion history, the rustle of impossibly full skirts preparing to make their debut. Remember, you tell the models, you're not just wearing clothes, you're carrying the dreams of every woman who spent the war years dressed in practical ugly. Walk like you're proving that beauty matters more than practicality, that elegance is worth any amount of effort, that French fashion refuses to be reasonable about anything ever again. The music begins, a classical piece that sounds like angels announcing the resurrection of luxury. Sylvie steps onto the runway, and you watch the audience's reaction ripple through the room like shock waves. Jaws drop, pencils freeze mid-note. Fashion editors who've seen everything suddenly realize they've never seen anything like this. The collection unfolds like a masterclass in why French fashion exists to make other fashion apologize for being insufficient. Look after look demonstrates that rationing is over, practicality is optional, and French designers have emerged from the war with techniques that make pre-war couture look restrained. Each dress is more impossible than the last, each silhouette more defiant of conventional wisdom about what women should wear versus what they could wear if clothing was designed to transform rather than merely cover. Carmel Snow from Harper's Bazaar sits in the front row, and you can see her mental calculations as she realizes she's witnessing a historical moment. This isn't just a fashion show. It's a declaration that the age of utility clothing is over, that femininity is back, and that French fashion intends to remind the world what happens when limitation is replaced by imagination, funded with sufficient budget. Look number 14 features a coat that requires engineering principles to remain structurally sound. Look 23 showcases an evening gown that uses enough tulle to stock a ballet company. Look 47 demonstrates that daywear can be sculptural without sacrificing wearability. Each piece proves that the techniques developed during wartime scarcity, when applied to post-war abundance, create results that transcend fashion and approach wearable architecture. The audience isn't just watching clothes, they're witnessing the birth of modern luxury fashion. Every dress demonstrates that French design has evolved beyond creating pretty things into creating transformational experiences. These clothes don't just make women look different, they make women become different versions of themselves, more confident, more elegant, more willing to take up space in the world. You realise you're not just showing a collection, you're launching a revolution that will change how women dress for the next decade, how the fashion industry operates, and how the world thinks about the relationship between clothing and identity. 24 hours after your show, the fashion press has exploded like a literary atomic bomb, and the fallout is both more positive and more negative than you could have imagined. The reviews range from revolutionary masterpiece that redefines femininity to frivolous waste that insults women's intelligence, often in the same publication, sometimes in the same paragraph. Congratulations, you've created the most controversial fashion collection since someone decided corsets were optional. Carmel Snow's review in Harper's Bazaar reads like a love letter to your revolution. It's quite a revolution, dear Christian. Your dresses have such a new look. Her enthusiasm is so palpable that it practically leaps off the page and starts taking measurements for its own couture wardrobe. She's dubbed your aesthetic the new look, and the name is already spreading through fashion circles like gossip about particularly juicy scandal. But for every critic who celebrates your vision, another attacks it with the fury of someone who thinks you've personally insulted their ancestors. The practical fashion establishment is losing its collective mind. Wasteful excess during Reconstruction, screams one headline. Return to repressive femininity, declares another. Dior insults modern women, shouts a third, as if your dresses are committing crimes against progress simply by existing beautifully. Listen to the rustling of newspapers being turned by hands that shake with either excitement or outrage. The heated conversations in cafes where fashion enthusiasts argue about the future of femininity. The most vicious criticism comes from people who seem personally offended by the idea that women might want to wear something beautiful instead of practical. A review in Combat reads like a declaration of war against your waistlines. At a time when women have proven their strength and independence, Dior wants to trap them in corsets and costume them like dolls. This is not fashion. This is regression disguised as luxury. But the customers tell a different story. The telephone hasn't stopped ringing since the show ended. Orders are pouring in from women who've apparently been waiting their entire lives for someone to design clothes that make them feel like the heroines of romantic novels, instead of efficient workers in practical uniforms. The waiting list for fittings extends into next year, and clients are offering to pay premium prices for the privilege of wearing revolution. American buyers are practically throwing money at you. They're ordering pieces sight unseen, based solely on descriptions that sound like fantasy fiction, written by someone with unlimited fabric budget. Yes, we'll take the coat that uses 12 yards of cashmere. Absolutely, we want the dress that requires its own structural engineering. Of course, we'll order the evening gown that weighs more than a small refrigerator. The controversy is actually boosting sales rather than hurting them. Women are arriving at your atelier specifically because they've read that your clothes are impractical and excessive and completely unnecessary for modern life. They want impractical. They've had enough practical to last several lifetimes. They're ready for unnecessary beauty, excessive elegance, and fashion that argues with the concept of efficiency. You realise that the critics who hate your work are actually proving its necessity. Their outrage reveals how much the world needs beauty that refuses to justify itself, elegance that exists purely for the sake of elegance, fashion that prioritises transformation over function. The louder they complain about waste and frivolity, the more they demonstrate that women are starving for exactly the kind of waste and frivolity you're providing. The negative reviews become unintentional advertisements for the psychological relief your clothes provide. When critics attack your dresses for being too beautiful for practical women, they're accidentally announcing that your clothes are designed for women who refuse to be merely practical. 6 months later, you're standing in your expanded atelier watching seamstresses create miracles for clients from countries you couldn't locate on a map 6 months ago. The new look has escaped Paris like elegant wildfire, spreading across continents and transforming wardrobes from New York to Tokyo. Your revolution has become a global phenomenon, and frankly, even you're surprised by how completely the world has embraced the idea that French fashion should be gorgeously impractical. The American market has exploded beyond your wildest projections. Department stores are fighting bidding wars for the right to carry licensed versions of your designs. Copyists are working overtime to create budget interpretations of your silhouettes, spreading the new look aesthetic to women who could never afford couture but desperately want to participate in the fashion revolution you accidentally started. Rita Hayworth appears on magazine covers wearing your designs, and suddenly every woman in America wants to look like she could star in romantic films while grocery shopping. The psychological impact is immediate and profound. Your clothes don't just make women look different, they make women act different. Sales clerks stand straighter, housewives walk like they're on runways, office workers begin treating their daily wardrobes like performance art. Listen to the international phone calls from buyers placing orders in languages you don't speak for designs that apparently translate perfectly across cultural boundaries. The British market initially resisted with typical British suspicion of anything that seems too enjoyable, but even their practical sensibilities couldn't withstand the transformational power of properly fitted bodices and impossibly full skirts. Princess Margaret herself has been photographed in your designs, effectively giving royal approval to the idea that fashion should prioritise beauty over efficiency, elegance over practicality, and joy over sensible considerations. The production requirements are becoming logistical nightmares that would challenge military supply operations. A single, new-look dress requires more fabric, time, and skilled labour than most fashion houses used for entire collections before the war. You're employing seamstresses by the dozen, fabric suppliers are working overtime to meet your material demands, and your workshop has expanded into multiple buildings that operate like a luxury manufacturing complex dedicated to the production of wearable dreams. The financial numbers are becoming abstract concepts that require accounting specialists to manage. Your designs generate more revenue per piece than entire pre-war fashion houses earned annually. The profit margins on haute couture are approaching the realm of precious metals and rare art. You're not just selling clothes, you're selling access to a transformation that wealthy women are willing to pay extraordinary amounts to experience. But the most satisfying success isn't financial, it's psychological. Letters arrive daily from women describing how your clothes changed their lives. For the first time since the war, I felt beautiful instead of merely functional. Your dress made me remember who I was before I had to be practical about everything. I walked differently, talked differently, thought about myself differently. You realise you've created more than a fashion trend. You've launched a global movement that argues for beauty as necessity, elegance as right, and transformation as available for purchase. The new look has become the uniform of post-war optimism, the costume of confidence, the external manifestation of women's refusal to remain practical when they could be magnificent. The fortune teller was right, but she undersold the scope. You're not just making women happy through dresses, you're making the entire world reconsider the relationship between clothing and identity, between fashion and psychology, between what women wear and who women become when they put it on. 5 years after the new look conquered the world, you're standing in the headquarters of what has become the most influential fashion empire in human history, and it feels like commanding a small, very stylish country. Your name appears on everything from haute couture gowns that cost more than automobiles to perfumes that make entire department stores smell like expensive French dreams. Congratulations, you've accidentally built a business empire by refusing to design sensible clothes. The Dior headquarters occupies an entire building on Avenue Montaigne, and it operates with the precision of a Swiss watch, crossed with the creativity of a fever dream. Every floor buzzes with activity that would make corporate efficiency experts weep with joy. The ground floor houses your boutique, where clients browse ready-to-wear pieces like they're selecting art for their personal galleries. The upper floors contain ateliers where seamstresses create miracles from fabric, with the focused intensity of surgeons performing life-saving operations. Your office overlooks the Champs-Élysées, and from this window, you can watch women wearing your designs navigate the streets of Paris like walking advertisements for the transformational power of properly tailored confidence. Every Dior silhouette that passes below represents not just a sale, but proof that your vision of elegant revolution has become the new normal for how sophisticated women present themselves to the world. Listen to the soft hum of sewing machines creating tomorrow's fashion history, the whispered conferences between pattern makers discussing the physics of impossible beauty. The business model has evolved into something that would make economists question their understanding of luxury markets. You're not just selling clothes, you're licensing dreams, franchising elegance, and exporting French sophistication to every corner of the globe where people have enough money to pay premium prices for the privilege of wearing your vision of how women should move through the world. The Dior perfume line launched last year with Miss Dior, and it's selling like you've bottled the essence of post-war optimism mixed with the confidence that comes from wearing perfectly fitted clothes. Women don't just buy the fragrance, they buy the entire lifestyle it represents. The marketing doesn't sell perfume, it sells the promise of transformation, the suggestion that wearing Dior means joining a global community of women who refuse to be anything less than magnificent. Your design team has grown from your basement conspirators to a sophisticated operation that functions like a university, dedicated to the advanced study of making women look impossibly elegant. Marie now heads the Textile Innovation Department, developing fabrics that didn't exist 5 years ago. Jean-Claude manages the accessories division, creating handbags and shoes that complement your silhouettes perfectly. Simone oversees the embellishment workshop, where details are crafted with the precision of jewellery making. The international expansion reads like a military campaign for global fashion domination. Dior boutiques in New York, London, Tokyo, and Sao Paulo serve as embassies of French elegance, each one adapted to local tastes while maintaining the essential DNA of your aesthetic vision. The American market alone generates more revenue than entire European countries produce annually, proving that your revolution has genuine international staying power. But the most satisfying aspect isn't the financial success. It's watching how your clothes change the women who wear them. Department store buyers report that women who purchase Dior pieces return within months to build entire wardrobes around that first transformational purchase. It's like your designs are gateway drugs to confidence, elegance, and the addictive sensation of moving through the world as the best possible version of yourself. The production challenges have become exercises in logistics that would impress military supply officers. A single haute couture piece requires coordination between fabric suppliers, specialty seamstresses, embellishment artisans, and fitting specialists across multiple countries. Your supply chain operates like a global network dedicated to the single purpose of creating clothes so beautiful they justify their own existence. You realize you've created something larger than a fashion house. You've built a cultural institution that defines how the post-war world thinks about luxury, femininity, and the relationship between clothing and identity. Every dress that leaves your ateliers carries the message that beauty matters, that elegance is worth pursuing, and that French fashion will always prioritize transformation over mere functionality. The fortune teller's prophecy has exceeded even her mystical expectations. You're not just making women happy through dresses, you're reshaping global culture through the strategic deployment of impossible beauty, proving that sometimes the most practical thing you can do is create something completely impractical that makes people remember why life is worth living beautifully. You're reading letters from clients around the world, and they read like testimonials for a therapy program that happens to involve expensive clothes. The psychological impact of your designs has evolved beyond fashion into something approaching social transformation, and frankly, even you're surprised by how completely wearing the right dress can change someone's entire relationship with their own existence. The correspondence arrives daily from women whose lives have been altered by the experience of wearing clothes that refuse to be practical. Mrs. Hamilton from Boston writes, "Your new look dress didn't just change how I looked, it changed how I thought about myself. For the first time since my husband returned from the war, I felt like a woman instead of just a caretaker." Her letter continues for 3 pages, describing in detail how proper tailoring restored her sense of identity after years of focusing exclusively on everyone else's needs. The phenomenon is happening globally with remarkable consistency. Women discover that clothes designed to transform, rather than merely cover, create psychological changes that extend far beyond their wardrobes. They stand straighter, speak with more authority, take up space with confidence instead of apologizing for their presence. It's like your dresses come with built-in posture coaching and confidence therapy. Listen to the rustle of international correspondence being sorted, the soft conversations between assistants discussing appointment schedules that stretch across continents. Dr. Elizabeth Brenner, a psychiatrist from Vienna, has been studying what she calls the Dior effect, the measurable psychological changes that occur when women transition from practical clothing to transformational fashion. Her research suggests that your designs trigger neurological responses similar to those produced by successful psychotherapy sessions. Wearing clothes that make women feel beautiful activates confidence centers in the brain that have been dormant since the practical necessities of wartime survival took priority over personal joy. The business implications are staggering. You're not just selling fashion, you're selling psychological transformation to women who are willing to pay extraordinary amounts for the experience of remembering what it feels like to be the protagonist of their own lives instead of supporting characters in everyone else's stories. The repeat customer rate approaches religious devotion levels, suggesting that your clothes create psychological dependencies that transcend normal consumer behavior. The cultural influence has become impossible to ignore. Fashion magazines worldwide structure their editorial calendars around your seasonal collections. Other designers openly admit they're either copying your techniques or deliberately reacting against them. The entire global fashion industry now operates in reference to aesthetic standards you established through your refusal to design anything that could be described as merely sensible. Hollywood has embraced your designs as the official costume of sophisticated femininity. Grace Kelly, Ava Gardner, and Elizabeth Taylor wear your creations like armour made of elegance, and their public appearances become advertising campaigns for the transformational power of proper French tailoring. When these women appear in your designs, they don't just look beautiful. They embody an aspirational version of womanhood that makes millions of viewers reconsider their own relationship with clothes, confidence, and personal presentation. The sociological impact extends beyond individual transformation into broader cultural shifts. Women who wear your designs report being treated differently by colleagues, family members, and strangers. The clothes create a halo effect where the wearer is perceived as more competent, more sophisticated, more worthy of respect and attention. It's like your dresses come with social promotion benefits that extend far beyond aesthetic improvement. Universities are beginning to study your work as cultural phenomenon rather than commercial enterprise. Anthropologists examine how your designs influence post-war gender roles. Economists analyse how luxury fashion became a vehicle for women's psychological reconstruction after years of wartime self-sacrifice. Sociologists document how your aesthetic vision redefined the relationship between appearance and authority in professional and social contexts. You realise you've accidentally created a global experiment in the relationship between external appearance and internal psychology, proving that the right clothes don't just make women look different, they make women become different versions of themselves, more confident, more elegant, more willing to claim space in the world as people deserving of beauty, respect, and the kind of attention that transforms ordinary moments into occasions worth celebrating. The fortune teller's prophecy has revealed its full scope. Through dresses, you're not just making women happy, you're making them powerful. You're standing in your private office on a quiet Sunday evening, surrounded by sketches for next season's collection, and the fortune teller's words echo through your mind like a perfectly tailored prophecy that has exceeded even mystical expectations. You will make women happy through dresses. She was right, but she was also wildly conservative in her prediction. You haven't just made women happy, you've fundamentally altered how the world thinks about fashion, femininity, and the relationship between clothing and human transformation. The original tarot cards lie framed on your desk, a reminder of that desperate afternoon when you spent your last coins on cosmic career counselling. The fortune teller couldn't have predicted that her simple prophecy would launch a global empire that redefined luxury, revolutionized post-war culture, and proved that sometimes the most practical thing you can do is create something completely impractical that makes people remember why beauty matters. The numbers tell a story that would make business school case studies weep with envy. Christian Dior SA employs thousands of people across multiple continents, generates revenue that rivals small nations' GDP, and influences fashion trends that determine what hundreds of millions of women wear every day. But the real success isn't measurable in financial terms. It's visible every time a woman puts on clothes that make her feel like she could conquer anything through the strategic deployment of perfect tailoring. Listen to the gentle tick of the clock marking time in an empire built on the belief that women deserve to be magnificently dressed. The soft rustle of sketches for dreams not yet realised. Your influence has transcended fashion into cultural institution. Fashion schools worldwide teach Dior techniques as fundamental principles of luxury construction. Museums collect your designs as historical artifacts that capture the psychological reconstruction of post-war femininity. Government officials consider your exports as important to French cultural diplomacy as wine, cheese, and philosophical arguments about the nature of existence. The psychological research continues to validate what you've known intuitively since those basement sketching sessions. Clothes designed to transform rather than merely function create measurable improvements in confidence, posture, and social perception. Dr. Brenner's latest study suggests that women who regularly wear well-tailored, beautiful clothing score higher on tests measuring self-efficacy, leadership potential, and overall life satisfaction. Your dresses are essentially wearable therapy that happens to look spectacular. The competitive landscape has been permanently altered by your revolution. Every fashion house now competes not just on aesthetic merit, but on transformational capacity. The question isn't just, does it look good, but does it make the wearer feel capable of greatness? You've raised the stakes for the entire industry, forcing everyone to consider fashion as psychology rather than mere decoration. The next generation of designers studies your work like gospel, but they're missing the essential element that made everything possible. You never designed clothes for the world that existed. You designed for the world that could exist if women refused to be practical when they could be magnificent instead. Your sketches were always love letters to possibility, IOUs written to futures that seemed impossible, but turned out to be inevitable. Looking back, the path from unemployed gallery owner to global fashion emperor seems obvious, but living through it required faith in a fortune teller's prophecy and stubborn refusal to design anything that could be described as sensible. Every sketch was an act of rebellion against practical limitations. Every dress was proof that French fashion would never surrender to efficiency. Every collection was a declaration that beauty matters more than convenience. The fortune teller got one detail wrong. You haven't just made women happy through dresses. You've made them powerful, confident, and unwilling to settle for anything less than the extraordinary in any aspect of their lives. Your clothes were never just clothes. They were external manifestations of internal transformation. Costumes for the best possible versions of themselves. Armour made of elegance for battles fought with confidence instead of weapons. The prophecy is complete, but the revolution continues. Every day, women around the world put on clothes inspired by your vision and walk out into the world carrying a little bit of that fortune teller's magic. The belief that they deserve to be beautifully dressed, elegantly presented, and magnificently themselves. Would you have believed her if she'd told you the full scope of what was coming? Probably not. Sometimes the most extraordinary futures begin with the simplest prophecies. Through dresses you will make women happy. Everything else was just the magnificent details of making that magic manifest in silk, confidence, and the kind of beauty that changes everything it touches.